Where are you? Where are you residing? That looks like a lovely room. I'm always. It's a bit like.
Yeah.
It's a,
which founder or funder is this? I am in the upstairs. It was my wife's office. It's now my office. She loves that. But she actually has converted the whole of kind of our sitting room, which is actually a much nicer room, into her new office. So that's sort of
sounds like a good trade.
yeah, she's actually ended up, and she has the fire on in the afternoon, and she's sitting down in the comfy chair just reading the books. Yeah, and West London, Ladbroke Grove.
Oh, nice. And how have you been keeping?
Pretty good, thank you. Not bad.
Good. Yeah, all right. We have the usual homeschooling shocks, which we usually come on Fridays, actually, which are a joy because, they're usually at the school calling and saying, "Oh, your son hasn't submitted his English for a week," and he's up there, apparently doing his English homework, but clearly he's not. So that's it's always a bit of a joy to behold when you kind of get that. Yeah. And also, I think one of the other great things about homeschooling is you only ever hear from the schools when there is bad news. So automatically they're not going to call you and go, "Hey, yeah, you did a brilliant essay," or "Your daughter drew these fantastic pictures in art." It's never good news. But
so for all the teachers out there listening, there's your opportunity. Call with some good news once in a while.
Yeah, be a bit more positive.
Or even chatty, like, I guess they would say, like, "Yeah, it was a pretty good week." Just nothing as special, just it was pretty good.
He turned up online occasionally, which is always really good. But I mean, that is really, I know we'll dig into stuff in a sec, but I still feel, the whole EdTech piece, it's such a great opportunity for people to really get this right because we have one son who's at one school that does everything by Zoom and are all over it and are fantastic, but then the other school are, I don't know if they just don't seem to have grasped tech and how to, have a simple platform that can be used, that's really easily accessible, that can maybe draw in parents if needs be. I don't know,
the bill
something out there that I'm missing or schools are missing at the moment.
The bill has definitely come due for those who were like, "I don't need to learn how to use a computer. I'm not going to need to know that." Yeah, it's definitely changed now.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, the other thing about EdTech is I've been doing some doing the odd. Well, I have been doing some jazz piano lessons in lockdown because that is something interesting you can do at home. And it turns out I'm particularly bad with the sort of oral side of it. So anyway, so my teacher's put me on this sort of training program, which is like, it's sort of, you have to sing something or you have to guess what the interval is and stuff. Anyway, but the point is, you do it. It's all done in a program, and then depending how good you are, you then sort of speed up through the course. And if you're bad, it makes you redo it. So I've been redoing lots of the lessons. But
have you moved on from level 1 or?
No. She's like, "Please come on, Glenn. You just got to get just the basic one." And sort of 2 months in, and I'm like, "Wow, not so basic." But what was interesting was it was very clever. It was like it was going exactly at the right pace for me. I was just like, this is,
adaptive curriculum. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I know people have been talking about it for ages, but it was just seeing it like actually, working was just like, just great. Anyway.
All right, so that's you've already given us the answer to what are you doing outside work. So thank you for that. Look, thanks for taking the time today, and we'll be with you for hopefully 45 minutes. Clearly I think met probably 5-6 years ago, back in the days of Bloomberg, where you used to be one of the.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we used to come to some of the events that many of the events that we used to put on. And obviously a strong supporter of NotWIC, so thank you for all your support over the last 4 years. I'm coming up to my my anniversary, actually, 4-year anniversary on Valentine's Day, which
how romantic.
two things to celebrate, you know.
You launched your business on Valentine's Day.
I registered at Company's House, so clearly
about 8 p.m. at night, presumably.
Yes, yes, we were meant to be in a restaurant, but clearly I fell in love with Notwicks. So look, thanks for all the support from you, the team. Obviously Will, Nadine, Katja. So we've got to know the business ourselves. Today is obviously the floor is yours to tell people, listeners, watchers, a bit more about Albion, where you are. I suppose caveat it with first question. New year, new start. How are you viewing the world at large? Albion's participation in that. What's the key things that are keeping you busy? And is it obviously everyone in that we talk to, on the whole, are suggesting that 2021 is starting with quite a lot of vigor and zest, which is good. So just kind of what's Albion thinking?
I think we are feeling pretty upbeat about the potential for the the bit of the sector that we're in, and it's very conscious of the wider world context. But in terms of some of the startups coming through at the moment, it is we're seeing some really amazing companies coming through, and our own deal rate, we would target typically maybe 6 new investments in a year. We just closed one yesterday, which we'll announce shortly. We're just about to sign terms with another one, and I think we've got 2 more that are looking pretty mature. And, we're only in the 3rd week of January. So
and Ed, can I ask, is that businesses that you kind of you would have invested in last year and it's kind of been held back, or is it just are they new to your process? And you just if you can explain a bit more for people, how
I think everything's just going quicker. I know one of the things you wanted to ask me about is like what's day-to-day life like, and everything's just quicker and more intense. And I got lots of sort of pet theories about why that might be, but I guess the headlines were obviously March last year, everything went into kind of shock and stasis for a few months, but then the back end of the year it really picked up, and so we ended up still doing, I think it was 6 or 7 deals last year, but most of them are towards the end of the year. And then we've carried on this year at the same pace. Now, everything is just going that much more quickly. And the main reason I think that is it's just much easier to get hold of people. It's much quicker to make a decision.
Everyone's available.
Everyone's available. They are all available. And you're like, and you can kind of see it in the companies. A lot of the businesses that we invest in are enterprise software, and they. If you're signing a very large contract with a tier 1 bank, for example, they might need sign off from someone in the US, someone in Australia, someone in Belgium, and they can all just jump on a call and just make a decision, and that's that. Whereas you don't have quite the same sort of slow meeting cycle. And as you say, the decision makers who had been out traveling around the world and going to conferences and that sort of stuff, they're around. I don't know if it's something else, but it is moving everything seems to be moving very quickly.
Okay, great. And if you were to give people a sort of overview of okay, it's enterprise software, any particular verticals that you're seeing or laying more of your sort of focus on at the moment, and also maybe perhaps explain the investment size, and maybe a bit more on the process as well. That would be great.
Okay, I'll just give you the very quick sort of overview, maybe the headlines, and then if it's helpful to explain any more, I can in a moment. But so we've got about £600 million of funds under management, split basically across 2 funds. We've got 500 million of that is in evergreen venture capital trusts, and we have been running those for 25 years almost now, invested in 200 companies. And what we're really focusing on these days is investing at Series A into software and healthcare. We will do other things, but that's where we're really focusing our time and energy at the moment. And in addition, we run the UCL Technology Fund. We're on our second fund there, and that is a deep tech seed stage fund investing exclusively in IP coming out of UCL.
Okay, great. And if anything, if I'm a founder who's looking to approach Albion, would you say there's a particular type of business that you're looking for in 2021? Is there a razor sharp focus on a particular type of technology as you look out?
Yeah, so I know within UCL, I'll move on to the other points. Within UCL, I know that the team there are getting really excited about getting super excited about the life sciences investment. So cell and gene therapy, which is a real strength for UCL, is just like a super hot market at the moment. We've already had 3 companies float on NASDAQ from the first fund. I think we've got some other stuff coming through. Yeah, no, I mean, it's really seriously exciting. And then we've got a couple of investments in, one in quantum computing, which we really think that's coming of age at the moment. Wow. And then AI more generally, continues to be just a really core enabling technology, which is just powering so much of the excitement, I think, across other sectors, which leads, I guess, then, from our kind of Series A funds, I would say, the enterprise data stack, that feels like that, we've been investing in a few companies in that area. The one that we just invested closed this week is, again, another one in that area. And it feels like, if you just think of the world has, like been connected to everyone, and, we've got our smartphones and all the IoT devices out there, and everyone's moving everything into the cloud. And on top of this wave of information that is being collected, there is a data layer being constructed, and any company, that is, taking advantage of the data available, is, competing better in its market. I mean, it's super abstract to appreciate, but you can just see this in multiple sectors, across everything that we're looking at the moment. So that is one sort of big high level kind of structural point. But then I guess some other niches that we quite like, open banking feels like something that is definitely coming of age at the moment. Notwithstanding the Visa acquisition of Plaid sort of unwinding, it's still, I think there's some really exciting companies, some big ones. Tink over here in Europe is motoring along, I know that. But we're also just seeing, we've got an investment in a company called Credit Kudos, for example, and we can just see on the front line just the number of big companies out there coming up with an open banking strategy. We're seeing large financial institutions making, sort of clearly, issuing RFPs and, kind of, I guess, cementing their strategy around what they're going to do to take advantage of open banking information feeding into their core systems and processes. So that is another wave of activity at the moment. I think there are lots of exciting companies coming through at the moment and growing super rapidly.
It's quite interesting. So far, I'd say pretty much every guest that we've had on has pointed to COVID as being the great accelerator, but everybody's showing different examples of that. But I think here it's quite interesting that it's highlighting the adoption rate of technology that was available, new practices that were available, but it was just ticking along much more slowly. But now it's become urgent and important rather than not urgent but important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, if you think about a lot of the companies we want to back are providing mission critical services to their customers, and the holy grail is that they're making life faster, cheaper, and better, for their customers. And the only reason you wouldn't do that is, well, we've done it this way, in the past, and that's just the way it is, and we've got other things we don't worry about. Whereas that argument is sort of out, off the table, and so people are like, look, this is just going to make it easier for your customers. And then so picking on one of our companies, Credit Kudos, so they're providing open banking data to their customers to automate the assessment of whether or not someone does in fact have the income they claim. Can they afford the loan they're trying to take out? And then also they're providing the risk scoring using sort of predictions about the capability to repay the loans, and that is the holy grail that we're looking forward to, is to better predict whether or not someone can afford the loan. But the basic stuff, like have they got the money, have they got the income, and can they afford the loan, which is just the basics. This is a service that for many organizations have done, in call centers, or when people are like assessing a mortgage application, they'll print off the bank statements and they'll get their, sort of fluorescent pens out and like, okay, that one, is in yellow and that one's in orange.
And then scan it back up.
And the idea that, like in the current climate, like, would you rather have a call center or would you rather just, plug in an API that just automates it real time and is cheaper and quicker?
Yeah. And if you do have a call center that's now working from home, how does that still all work with all the PCI compliant stuff?
No, so all those arguments, but the argument was there, pre-COVID, but just now, yeah. So but that was one particular example, but.
Okay, great. And then if you look to give a bit more colour for the founders on the call, geographically, are you mainly UK focused or
almost entirely UK focused? The UCL Tech Fund is particularly, sort of focused, but the evergreen venture capital trusts are, benefit from support from the UK taxpayer. And the quid pro quo is that we're investing in the UK and creating, jobs and companies and, building, I guess the economic powerhouses of tomorrow as UK companies. So that is the focus. But these companies sell internationally. So, a huge number of our companies are now got, offices in the US and customers, or, Asia increasingly. So these days as well.
Just interestingly, Ed, any of the companies become unicorns in your portfolios so far?
So one of the life sciences investments that floated, I think it was 18 months ago. I think it was also the quickest company to go from the lab to floating on NASDAQ as well. But that was a unicorn outcome. And I mean, we got very, very lucky early on, because I think one of the first investments that we ever made in tech was a company called Active Hotels, which became Booking.com. And at $80 or $90 billion, actually probably a bit less at the moment, but I think even now it's still the most successful startup to come out of Europe.
I'm always intrigued, and I think again the whole myriad of more so the founders and actually probably some of the VCs that are potentially listening and watching. You've been very successful, or you are being very successful. How do you find these companies?
That is that's a very good question.
And to add on to it, and has that changed since COVID?
It's constantly changing. It was definitely changing. I mean, because a whole chunk of origination was done by going to events and meeting people, and that's not happening at all. I would say the best source of I guess deal flow for us continues to be referrals. And there are many different ways that can happen, but basically it has come into us, from someone else, and they have recommended that we have a look at a particular company. But we do also do, obviously outbound origination. We will have a thesis around a particular market. We'll kind of dig into that market, understand the drivers, go and speak to some of the companies, get a feel for whether or not it is in fact what we hope, and can we find a company at the right stage that fits our sort of profile. And I think it's switching a bit more in that direction compared to where it was. Okay. But the referral, I mean, the referrals are still great. We get thousands of business plans a year. Mm-hmm. There's an overwhelming amount of information and people, like lots of great people coming in with their ideas, and we just don't have the bandwidth to spend an hour on every single business plan. So you have to kind of filter and apply your time to ones where you think you're going to get a good return from effort.
So those referrals would be other funds that you maybe work with or co-invest with,
It could be a founder that we backed said, well, I'm in a founder network with another person, you should go and speak to them. I really rate them. It could be you guys. It could be another VC fund. Obviously a fund that invests slightly earlier than us would be an absolute classic route. So it could be, I don't know, one of the chairmen or women, one of the companies. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, got it. And then look, we had a really interesting chat a couple of weeks ago with another UK VC, and the lady we had on was talking quite a lot about how the US VCs seem to certainly be more present, and it's not just hype. They are coming over the Atlantic. COVID's accelerated this, being more front and center, focused on the UK and Europe. Just curious, are you seeing that more, Ed? Have you been involved in any conversations or deals where there's been a specific US fund that's
100% more activity from the US? And I think at every level, it is quite interesting that Sequoia and Bessemer, Lightspeed, some really well-known West Coast funds have building up a presence on the ground. The growth funds are also much more present than they used to be, and so we're finding also in our portfolio is receiving a lot more interest from US investors in particular than they used to. So it's I wouldn't say it's just the VCs. I would say it's experienced, very experienced professional tech investors of all nature and flavor coming into Europe.
Yeah. What do you think's driving that? Is it just dollar? Is it valuations? Is it what?
I think it's loads of things. And I was talking to someone else about this recently about what does it mean in terms of valuations and competition, and is it a bad thing? Particularly for us, lowly UK VCs, who might be feeling insecure about this stuff. But I don't think we are at all. It's just a good thing. So the first and most important thing is just the opportunity is just massive, and it's just growing. I mean, these funds have opened a presence, they're here, and yet our deal rate is going up, and I think the quality of the companies that we're looking at is improving. So that's a sort of anecdotal sort of frontline experience. The theory, I was just looking at this the other day. So global venture investment, when it on a global basis, all venture capital investment from 2010 to 2019 is $1.5 trillion. Wow. The market cap of Amazon, Facebook, and Google today is $3.7 trillion. So the money going in relative to the value coming out is still way out of whack. So an entire decade, the decade after those three companies had proven themselves, that decade is still, putting in a fraction of what those three are worth. And so the next, massive tech companies that are coming out are being made at the moment. And then I think you can see it in the public markets, which, there's a constant discussion around, is 20, 25, 30 times revenue, is that just hype? Is it a bubble? Is it going to explode? And I am a bit of a bull on this stuff. But I think, if you look at the conventional valuation models, they didn't account for a company goes and wins its market and then it just keeps growing. You're supposed to win it and then go into sort of steady state and maybe slowly then decline at some point, or you go through a sort of acquisition spree and start, moving to a different model, as opposed to you benefit from the network effect in a brand new market, and you just start, continue to grow stuff. I mean, for Amazon to be growing at the pace it's growing despite its size is ridiculous.
I think they also didn't really account for these huge cycles of QE and just really, really low interest rates for huge amounts of time.
Yeah, I think there is that. I mean, there's a sort of, you're right. As sort of conventional areas of the market begin to reduce in terms of their return, as you say, negative interest rates potentially as well, the premium on growth is perversely that much greater.
Yeah, and pension funds need to get the return as well. Otherwise, you know, that'll be catastrophic, but probably go into that for a much longer podcast.
So exactly. If we're looking at like a new database or data warehouse type technology, and we think it could be the next Snowflake, and then you look at Snowflake and you look at the valuation they're at, or Databricks, or, you know, and these are companies, you know, with I think $127 million annual revenue, still growing at 100%. And these are, you know, and you're like, well, that's what you could be worth if you succeed. So if I'm sitting here looking at Series A, how much am I prepared to pay to invest in that company if that's what it's worth, if it's successful? It might, I mean, probably won't be, but if it is, that's how much it's worth.
So it's very interesting. One of our guests that we had on before was talking about the difference in US investor sentiment and UK, and she was highlighting downside risk in the UK as the key focus when looking at a deal, and in the US, especially when it came to valuation, saying, well, to be honest, this is going to be a decacorn, you know, do I care if it's 5 or 7 million right now? Whereas she was saying there's a bit different with UK. Is that shifting, do you think?
Yeah, I used to hear that a lot, and I would say I probably partially agree with it, you know, 10 years ago. I just don't see that anymore. I'm quite surprised. It must exist, and it definitely, and you can make money for your investors investing in that way, in the right sort of companies. You know, it's not a bad approach, but it's just seeing so many, you know, massive funding rounds for very early stage companies with really good UK investors in there, and there's a lot more really good UK investors now than there used to be. A lot more, I guess, you know, that US style approach, because. By the way, I mean, I think it's a maturing of the market, but also because, you know, we have podcasts like this one, and, you know, people like, you know, me and all the others, you know, we're listening to all the people over on the West Coast and what they're doing, how they're approaching it. And, you know, everyone's moving into a content marketing cycle. So like it's not just a risk appetite, it's completely rational. If you think a company could be worth that in the future, to pay a big, what might look like a headline big valuation today, but if it's got a, you know, sort of 20% chance of being that valuable in the future,
it's kind of the nature of the beast almost.
Yeah.
Okay. Slightly changing tack. We kind of, as you know, Ed, we work a lot with sort of very early stage founders, you know, the Notwicks events, and, you know, positioning them for, you know, maybe there'd be something of interest for you in 12, 18 months, maybe 2 years time. I think there seems to me a bit of a concern amongst the industry that, you know, because of COVID, there's a slight lessening of people changing jobs to do that. Maybe, you know, I'm surprised by this, but, you know, you would think that perhaps with unemployment going up, there might be more people wanting to finally do the startup, get him in with a guy that they know or lady they know down the road who's a developer, and actually, you know, throw caution to the wind and do this. And I'm just getting this sense at the moment, there's obviously Series A, late, what you term late early, on fire, lots of people fighting over those hot, you know, bananas or hot cookies that have kind of, you know, they've got revenues, they're on a fast track to ARR of $1 million. We just kind of sense that pre that, and the pipeline that will be feeding you in maybe 12, 18 months, there could be a thinning, which is worrying, especially with, you know, obviously more, you know, there's a vast quantity of money being put to play. And, you know, do you see any kind of fears of that on your side, or do you think we're just being
I hadn't thought about that, and because I guess I haven't seen it, but you're quite right, it's much more likely to be at the sort of front end, you know, right at the seed stage, that it would be emerging now. And you can, I guess, theorize that, you know, if you were in a secure job right now and you've been thinking about quitting, you know, is now really the time to be risking your mortgage payments, given what's going on in the wider world? And so you can see, you know, but then on the other hand, you know, I don't like my job, you know, it's definitely reinforced when that's the only thing you're doing at home. So
yeah, if you really didn't like it, now you hate it.
Now you hate it. Exactly.
We've spoken to a couple of people recently, more on the founder side, that, you know, have effectively said, like, look, you know, the whole fact that we're in a room on our own or on a Zoom, a lot of businesses or really successful tech companies have been created in the past by people being in group situations in a workspace, a group of, you know, colleagues bouncing ideas off each other, and we just, there seems, obviously there's a bit of an inability to do as much of that at the moment. And, you know, I'm kind of, you know, I wonder, you know, if that's the problem. I don't know. I mean,
you're absolutely right. Yes, there's got to be less serendipity. There's the random conversation, you know, completely unexpected, that just triggers something that you can't force and predict. Yeah, that's got to be the case.
Yeah, and I suppose flipping it around to you know, you good folk at Albion, you know, I think we've talked about this in the past. Is there an you know, looking ahead, working from home, back to the office? What's the thought process? I imagine, like most people, you're missing that interaction, that colleague interaction.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I was just thinking about this. In the context of the chat I had with Alex McCracken at SVB. I don't know if you've spoken to him as part of this series, but we were having dinner ages ago, and he just came out with this comment. He said, he goes, I don't know if you thank me for saying this, but he goes, I think all VCs are really introverts. And I was just like, I don't. Anyway, so we had a good long conversation that rambled on for a long time beyond that dinner about whether or not that's the case. So we'd love to get your view on that as well. I don't think I'd class myself in that camp. So I'm definitely in the, I would really like to get back out there and see some people.
Yeah.
And we, you know, we speak to our colleagues the whole time and on Zoom, and it's great, but it's just not the same. You know, I miss them. I miss, you know, we are in a highly networked industry as well, where we're collaborating with people one day, competing against them the next, but then, you know, let's say collaborating again, and it's a very interconnected industry.
Yeah. Do you have is a, you know, you think summertime potentially you could be moving?
I mean, you're listening right now, and the news is so bad, but you know, if we do get to 70%, sorry, no, all over 70s vaccinated by the end of February, the case numbers coming down quite quickly. You know, it won't take much to get people to feel a bit more optimistic about life.
Yeah.
But what it looks like, that's the big question. Like, you know, do we go back 1 day a week, 3 days a week, 5 days a week?
We ease into it, I would imagine.
As you want.
Yeah, I think some of the founders are keen to go back in, you know, probably 4 days a week and do the 1 day at home. I mean, I think that whole energy of all being in the room is, you know, for the established scale-ups that we know and talk to, you know, they want that. They really crave it. So that's interesting. So then, you know, I'm always keen on these podcasts or vodcasts to find out a bit more what the thoughts are within each organization on key things like, you know, diversity, women in tech, ESG. I'm kind of curious in terms of, you know, what your business does in those spaces, what perhaps the focus is, how maybe some of the funds look at some of these aspects, and just kind of be like curious as to what your overall overarching view is of those kind of.
One I would add into that as well is, have you seen more interest from LPs around that category?
So I think we as a firm are, you know, completely supportive of the trend, trying to ensure we're as informed as we can be on the issues in hand and what can be done about them. And there's all sorts of stuff going on in the background, some of which is being implemented, some of which is still kind of, we're learning about to figure out what to do. The interesting about diversity in the companies that we invest in, I've always been a bit curious about that, and I've read, and I think, you know, the stats are what they are, and it's, you know, is not great. Yet you know, anecdotally, you know, the best performing companies are often led by people who feel like they're outsiders, and you can, you know, sort of make some guesses as to why that might be. But you know, you're disrupting an industry, you're going against the norm, like you want to you know, when EasyJet came along, like, you know, they were pricing things in a completely different way. You wouldn't want a whole load of people from the airline industry going, well, that's not how you sell, you know, stuff like, anyway, but it's just so many examples, you know, time and time again about how these sort of outside thinking, the fresh thinking, and not being afraid to be a bit different or whatever it is. And I think we've seen that. I can definitely see it in our portfolio, like the, you know, the people, you know, pushing and delivering it, you know, they don't feel, you know, like they belong there, and they're definitely not all Oxbridge graduates of a certain background. So I think and then you look at all the stats around, you know, the improved performance from companies that have diverse leadership. You know, it's just a no-brainer. If we are, which we are, a financially driven fund trying to get the best returns, like it turns out the best returns are from backing diverse founders and diverse teams. So it's you know, everyone wins if we can get on top of this. As it happens, we're actually just doing something at the moment for our companies. We've got 7 female CEOs or founders out of 40 active portfolio companies. I think I should just double check those numbers before we publish them, but anyway, that's approximately the case, which is, you know, it's not good enough, and yet it's better than many. Anyway, so, you know, we're doing what we can around the background. And to finish off on this, ESG is absolutely front of mind, and we're looking at you know, systems that can automate the measurement of some of these things. We're trying to encourage the portfolio to you know, themselves measure stuff, you know, sort of watch the space. But we're doing it, but at the same time, LPs and I guess, you know, sort of higher, you know, everyone's got someone higher up that they report to, and the people right at the very top, it's their #1 focus. You know, you've got some of the biggest asset managers globally, like, you know, highlighting the importance of ESG. The very last thing to add on ESG is the UN Principles on Responsible Investment is also an initiative that we see really gaining traction, and is also helping to drive the ESG sort of activities that we're seeing, you know, as I say, across all elements of the asset management industry. So it's yeah, it's great. It will drive change.
Okay, good. And then I suppose, you know, looking at the role of a VC, we have a fair amount of listeners who are thinking, I want to become a venture capitalist. I really think it's dead sexy, and I think it's like the new age hedge fund type manager that, you know, clearly, I suppose my days in broking, there are lots of people who suddenly in the 90s wanted to become a rock star hedge fund manager, that, you know, I had the interesting role of having to broke to or service some of them, and, you know, clearly it was fun, but not laboring, you know, going back too far into the annals of history. But just curious on you know, like what's your day job really like? And if you were like that 19, 20-year-old sort of student thinking, I want to be a VC, what would you sort of say that are the kind of the great things and maybe the things that aren't so glamorous?
I think it just depends what sort of person you are. It definitely is not sexy. I mean, I spend my whole time sitting at my desk on Zoom, and talking, yeah, and analyzing, and you know, you know, we're very financially driven, so you know, that's not for everyone at all. It can definitely be quite dry and analytical at times. Again, that's not for everyone, but it is within the world of investment. It's definitely I think the more people end of the spectrum. So we spend a lot of time meeting companies. You know, it's a few pitches a week. I'll speak to the CEOs of the companies I'm involved with most weeks, and you know, we spend the whole time, I guess, sort of, you know, talking as a team about, you know, some of the ideas coming through, be it the company specifically or markets generally or investment theses. And so it's a very it can be a very sort of collaborative, you know, sort of industry in that sense. So again, that's for some people, not for others. But it's definitely intense. It's all on.
And are you seeing, you know, I suppose, an uptick of interest from university level type graduates to want to come into the industry, or
yeah. There's if I was applying for a job now, there's no way I would get hired. I mean, it's there's some really talented people who deserve to be doing this, I think, who are just it's great, so it just means the capability of the VC industry is improving, which means better companies get funded in a better way, better outcomes, better for everyone.
Okay. And then I suppose other side of the coin, founders. You mentioned earlier you see nearly or receive thousands of pitches or decks a year. What's your sort of overarching tip for, say, someone who is a founder that's kind of got to that stage of meeting you guys, it comes into the office? What's the tip? You probably see some of them, what's that term, like die from a million kind of ways of dying, when they're pitching, and or you kind of like all as a team like go, inside you groan when you kind of hear a certain stat that they're throwing at you. What would you say would be things to avoid if you kind of a founder?
So you obviously need to be well prepared and know your stuff. We had one of those dying moments not that long ago when one of my colleagues asked what the size of the market was, and the response was, "Well, you can Google it."
That's bold.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure we will.
You can Google it because I didn't.
Anyway, so but assuming everyone's well prepared, I would say, like, everyone's got their own. All the funds have got different things they're looking for within a fund. Different people are, looking for different things. But I would say that the thing that definitely comes across, I think, is consistent across people who end up succeeding. Well, there are many things. One I will highlight now is the clarity of vision and the ability to tell a story. So, and it's actually, if you think of what founders are doing, early on, these are, in the infancy, tiny companies that are trying to make a dent on a really massive, ugly, highly competitive world. And how on earth are they going to persuade customers to go with them rather than, the safe option? How are they going to get like the top employees to come and join this risky startup? How are you going to get partners to come on board? How are you going to get funders to come in and put millions of pounds in a company that statistically is not going to work?
How do you achieve the improbable?
Yeah, exactly. And you sometimes, and it's a combination of this sort of persuasiveness which comes with storytelling and like being convincing, and that itself is linked to having a very clear mental picture of like how the world's going to change and how this particular company is going to have a place in that world and capture value in that new world. And it's all, I think you can come across some people who are very convincing and very clear in the way they describe that.
Then I suppose last one from me, which, it's been, first of all, it's been great to catch up and thank you for all your time and great answers. The last one is, it's not a curveball or anything. I am very passionate about UK tech, as you know, Ed. I'm excited about, William at Deliveroo is kind of IPOing, I think in April. Lots of great British built companies, tech companies on, I think, the slate to go from some of my friends at the London Stock Exchange have been telling me, or they hope, I think, is probably the bit I'd add there. But, kind of 2021 going forward, are you hopeful, or you have a strong belief that we could be seeing the start of a real kind of UK-led European kind of Silicon Valley building those kind of, big giants that could become the next kings of tech for the next 10 years? Are we on that pathway?
Absolutely. You should ask Sol Klein about this, because I know he's got this big view about how King's Cross is the next Palo Alto, which, I do, there are, some really big tech companies there. You've got sort of, Google and Facebook and others. You've got the Crick Institute just there. You've got all the universities around, it's a nice, and then the funders all moving in. So you've got this nice sort of hub developing. The UK more widely, I think we got 27 unicorns at the last count, so companies, very valuable companies about to hopefully realize some of the value on the public markets. But I feel, the UK is still the most active tech market outside of the US and China. London within that, I think, is particularly strong, and I feel very optimistic about what's coming through. So
and to be a driver of job creation on mass.
It's a massive driver of job creation, and these are the companies of tomorrow. I mean, you look at the most valuable companies in the US. The top 5 are all tech companies. Most of them are software companies. That's just how the the economy is shifting, and I think happily we appear to be getting on with that.
Okay, great. Well, look, Anthony, I don't know if you've got any last burning questions for
just to go on that a little bit, how big a role do you think the Future Fund will end up playing in that? It's still very early days, but obviously they've had a huge mandate to invest, and they've very quickly become a very diverse shareholder in UK startups through the Future Fund. Do you think they'll lean into that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the Future Fund specifically. Maybe, maybe not. I don't think we have enough information to form a judgment on that. What I would say is, regardless of whether or not we thought Brexit was a good idea, like, it's happened. And one thing that it does allow is an increase in agility of the regulators and of the policymakers. If we choose to do so as a nation, we would be able to further support, I think, what already has been some great policy measures that have stimulated the early years. We benefit from it, running VCTs, but the EIS scheme as well and the CDER scheme is fantastic in terms of incentivizing money to go into the startup community, and you can definitely correlate the activity at the kind of seed stage with attractive tax breaks for investors. And it's it's very much a it wasn't a top down we are going to build the next 3i or whatever it was that's going to be doing this all for you because we know best because we're the government. It's like, we will just make more money available to go into these types of companies, and that has really worked and is continuing to work. And I think there are potential initiatives that could support companies at later stages, be it on the financial side, but I know the Scale Up Institute is doing some good stuff, building other networks. I think it's exciting to see where this might go, and there's a lot of will and desire. You can hear it in all of the conversations at the top of government at the moment.
Okay, look, Ed, brilliant answers. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure to chat.
Yeah,
keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. I look forward to also seeing you in our beloved Groucho Club for.
Can you imagine just hearing Rod in the piano down there as you get the espresso martini?
Wow.
Not too late. I mean, that's
your new skills of jazz piano.
Might be Ed on the piano.
That would be the quickest way to clear the bar. B, I did ask Rod if I could play his piano once when the bar was empty, and he said absolutely not. You must never play anyone else's piano. Like I just committed something to say.
So
I didn't.
You'll have to bring your own.
Yeah, exactly. Mine's in the reception.
Yes. All right. Well, look, great. Thanks, mate, and take care. And we will look forward to seeing you out of lockdown, hopefully.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Bye.